Hello, Chris. Great to see you. Welcome to Southside Stories.
Pleasure. Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, no, it's great. We all start these sessions the same way, which is to get into a little bit about you. Let's just start with you, your job title, and where you're
Yeah.
based. Let's kick that off.
Okay. Yeah. So we're based in South London, just by London Bridge, and I'm the director and co-founder of an environmental and sustainability consultancy called Eight Versa.
Fantastic. And do you run that with by yourself or with your other co-founder, or how does
Yeah.
that
So
work?
there's two of us, two co-founders and two directors, and yes, we both joined the company when it was a lot smaller, kind of say a few people, several people, and it's grown to maybe be 50 so people today. And yeah, it's kind of gone through many iterations, and it's quite a different company to what it was when we took it. It was kind of really a startup, and yeah, we managed to get it into a reasonable sized organization, dealing with some big clients and some exciting opportunities. So yeah, it's been a long road, but we've been at it since 2011, and yeah, that's where we've got to today through all kinds of blood, sweat, and tears. But it's been quite a good ride, to be honest.
Yeah, awesome. Did you say 50 people? 50?
Yeah.
That's a pretty good sized company now. Well,
Keeps us
that's a
busy.
great
Yeah.
try. Yeah, I'm sure it does. Yeah, we'll get into a bit more of that in a second. So you've been involved. I mean, I've got to tell you that over the last 2 3 weeks, quite a few conversations with really awesome companies in the
Right.
sustainability field. I don't know, Southwark seems to be quite a bit of a hot pot for some of this.
Yeah.
We'll talk about that some more in a second. But I mean, most of those have been more recent entrants, and you've been going, what's that, 13, 14 years now. Tell me a little bit, what drives, how did you get into this? Was it a passion? What got you into this in the first place?
Yeah, I'd say it was a passion. I was given some advice to study quantity surveying at university by an older gentleman who'd been in the industry quite a while because you got more money doing that than other respective kind of project management or other surveying roles in the industry. And obviously, he was a very kind of money motivated person, and I was kind of young, and I didn't go to university until I was 21, and I actually went after I'd been young and gone out, spent all my money boozing and acting like a prat and that kind of thing. So when I went to university, I kind of got my head on screwed on. I was like, I'm going to go and
Yeah,
I'm going to achieve something. I'm not there to
yeah,
blow a student loan. So I went there with a very clear mission, and I was deciding which course to do, and this chap was saying, do this, you'll earn the most money out of everyone in the construction industry. And I thought, okay, well, all right, doesn't sound too bad to a 21-year-old. So yeah, I kind of went down that path, but then probably a few years in, I just thought this is, I don't want to be doing things for money. It's not really what motivates me. I'm more motivated by solving problems and practical challenges. And I think at the time, this was 20 years ago, but I think the kind of environmental sustainability movement was kind of getting more. I think it was getting more attention. It was still quite a niche thing, and back then I suppose a lot of environmentalists were considered to be people who hugged trees and did some zany things. But I think it was kind of evolving something that was a bit more technical, perhaps, and a bit more um, bigger than hyper localized activism and stuff like that. I found that quite appealing, and when I learned more about, say, climate change or kind of the other environmental challenges, I think ultimately I think it appealed to my desire to solve problems and to take on challenges. And I think there isn't really a bigger challenge than the environmental problem, of all things considered. So, so yeah, I thought, why not? I'll give this a go. And it's interesting actually because if I looked at kind of what a retirement arc might have been for me, I was looking at retiring around 2050, and pretty much all of our sustainability and climate goals have this drop dead date of 2050. So I thought, perfect, that's a career plan, and kind of, well, if we hit the targets at 2050, then that'll be my retirement date, and then there we go, I'm done. So yeah, I kind of went into it that, and then I did some extra studies. I kind of started networking and trying to move away from the construction side of things, pure construction, and get into the environmental and sustainability and energy engineering and environmental engineering. And I kind of blended the construction side and the environmental side, and kind of became something equivalent to, say, an environmental engineer. So yeah, problem solving, understanding systems and how to kind of get the best of them, optimize them, or maybe hack them in some way.
Great. Awesome. So tell us now a little bit about 8 Versa then.
Mhm.
What problems do you look to solve at 8
Yeah.
Versa?
Well, most of our work was generated originally by regulation. So we have a very big presence in the built environment and infrastructure and all kinds of urban environment development. Um, that's a very heavily regulated kind of sector really, and it's had environmental standards put upon it for basic environmental standards for a while, but sustainability standards probably about 20 years really, and so that's in environmental terms, it's probably one of the most regulated sectors. So that obviously generates an industry and a lot of work, and people gravitate towards it who are in that field. So first, it starts off as solving compliance issues and getting developers planning because they need to show that they were building environmentally consciously or whatever that might be. And we had to demonstrate that, get them into shape, tell them how to do that, and then move forward. But more recently, since sustainability kind of went mainstream around 2020, 2021, when sustainability just went through the roof and net zero really took off as a discipline and loads of new entrants piled into the market. We've been catering more for, I think, organisations that have it's maybe something that they want to be part of their identity or their values, or they have a corporate strategy which has sets down voluntary aspirations. And more so, we're doing work with organisations that have a voluntary or a market differentiating kind of intent. Like we want to be known for this, we want to do this better. So that's where our kind of I think our offering to the market has changed a little bit. And in doing that, we're hopefully trying to add as much value as we possibly could, rather than just resolving compliance and regulatory issues, and then trying to steer and direct and also solve problems because there's an untold amount of problems and challenges through adapting business models or finding different ways to do things, or even just gathering the data and making sense of it. So we do a lot more problem solving than we used to, which is great, and that for me personally, that's what I find interesting. So I think we're really about problem solving, get our hands dirty, and helping clients navigate a very kind of rocky terrain to where they need to go. And really, there isn't actually a truly sustainable company in existence yet, or a net zero company. So no one knows what this end point looks like.
Mm.
So we're really trying to map it as well as walk it as well at the same time.
And do those more recent projects where you've moved away from compliance, is
Mm.
that still around construction and property type projects, or is it broader?
It's actually quite a bit broader. So
Yeah.
most of our construction and property clients tend to still be compliance based, but with an element of voluntary. And our kind of more corporate clients, they're probably the opposite. They're probably more voluntary with a little bit of mandatory disclosures that they need to do.
Mm-hmm.
But they're doing it because they're spying an opportunity, I suppose, to gain market share or carve out a more distinctive brand, or because they have investors and stakeholders which perhaps are more attuned to that now than they were 10 years ago. So they're obviously trying to kind of address that. So yeah, they're the kind of two different sides.
Yeah.
The built environment and the corporate definitely
Yeah.
have different motives right now.
Tell us a bit more. We'll cover both, but tell us first off a bit more about the corporate side then. So where it might be voluntary or part of a bigger strategy for whatever reason. What
Mm.
could you give a couple of examples of what that looks like?
Yeah, so the backbone of most environmental or sustainability strategies, and this is for I suppose for both sectors, tends to be carbon based. So it's about carbon footprinting. What's my carbon footprint for my activities, my operations, my supply chain? Understanding that, and then I think once you get a grasp of that, then you kind of branch off into other metrics. It might be, so how much water do I consume? How much pollution do I create? What's my impact on air quality? That kind of thing. So at the very, very top of the kind of company size hierarchy, we have big companies that are classed as large entities legally, and they have much more kind of, and public listed companies have much more due diligence and reporting they need to undertake, and increasingly so that's been added to with carbon and climate risk, and that's been embedded in their disclosures, and that's kind of filtered through all the way through the industry. So you get mid-market companies who are wanting to obviously be seen on par as some of these bigger companies, so they need to go out and procure a carbon footprint. So we've got to go and calculate all of their supply chain and all of their impacts on climate. Also, how resilient are they, or how resilient is their business model, perhaps in terms of climate change. So let's say we have 2 degrees of warming by the next 10, 15 years. What does that mean to their business model? Are there opportunities, risks, and also so it's kind of like what's their impact and what's the world's direction of travel? What's the impact going to be on them as they kind of, I suppose, want to have a long running, viable, profitable business over the next 20 years? What does that mean in the context of climate threats and opportunities and risks and that kind of thing? So that's a bit more the mindset of the corporate company, really. It's immediate, like what I need to report my carbon now, next year, and the ultimate, and indefinitely. But then it's also, am I going to have a profitable business in 15 years' time when all the regulatory and physical infrastructure and the climate changes and adapts? Where does that leave my business? Which is actually quite a fun scenario, I suppose, to model and a challenge to try and work your way through. So yeah, that's the kind of complexion of corporate mindsets in sustainability.
And where would you start with that? So that's pretty broad kind of
Mm.
canvas, and I guess if a corporate is coming from kind of greenfield start sort of thing, that
Yes.
where do you start? Because that's a hell of a lot of work to do. Even working out the
Mm.
carbon footprint of a
Yeah,
big-ish company is a big task, isn't it?
it is. Yeah. Well, we usually start with the quite it's quite mundane in many senses. It's all right, let's look at all your energy bills, all of your buildings, everything like that. We're looking at all the fuels you're purchasing and what's your usage profile throughout the day, month, year. Understanding that, then we've got to get into their procurement system and their accountancy system. Where's the sometimes just because you're spending money doesn't mean that in a certain area doesn't mean that you're generating a lot of carbon, but we've got to understand that a pound spent in one area of procurement will have a different carbon impact to another. So we've got to see where the money's flowing to, and then attribute associated carbon for that activity. So we're kind of mapping out the I suppose the procurement and the activities of the company, translating that into kind of carbon currency, and through that we get a bit of a hotspot analysis. So we can kind of
Mm.
say, all your kind of upstream purchases of all your equipment and feedstocks to produce your product or whatever, that's 2/3 of your emissions. So let's focus on that. Let's not worry
Yeah.
about the recycling policy at HQ and all that kind of stuff. Let's just look at your suppliers. How do we get them to provide you with a lower impact product, and what's feasible, and then over the next kind of say 6-12 months, hopefully we'd engage with their top 10 suppliers and kind of and ask them, what are you doing in this respect? Do you have any plans to make this product, this input, lower carbon? And then try and kind of leverage the network effect of going out to all these suppliers. And if you can get half of your suppliers to make a 10% improvement, that can make quite a big impact overall.
And I take it you would be telling them, your client, to do that. You wouldn't be going yourself to their supply chain, would you?
If they want us to, yeah, I mean that's
Okay.
kind of a bit more fun. We do it in tandem with them, but
Yeah.
obviously they carry the big stick, and then we're I suppose we're kind of talking in their ear. But we found that, to be honest, sometimes our clients have said, "Can you just go and speak to them?" And then we go and speak to them, and their suppliers like, "Who the hell are you?" And I'm not selling to you. So we kind of we go together, and that works quite well. But yeah, as you said, it's a very complex discipline, and pulling out the data is one thing, but then making sense of it is the other. You can spend so much time mining data, and then it's if you don't use it, then what good is it? So yeah, that's kind of a typical, I suppose, typical project for us with a corporate client.
You got it sounds like you've got to be kind of maybe not experts in everything, but you've got to have a pretty wide set of understanding of a lot of different things, right? Energy, water, all the different supply chains, the routes of the supply
Yeah.
chain. That's a huge task. Do you have any tools? I mean, I was talking to a startup called Trip Shift down, who are based down in the fifth floor down at County Hall, just down
Okay.
the road from
Yeah.
where you are.
Nice.
I don't know if you know about that place. It's Sustainable Ventures. There's 200 sustainable companies
Yeah, I
in
heard about
there.
that recently. I couldn't believe it.
Yeah,
You know, yeah, what a hope.
really interesting. You should get an invite or go down and have a look at it.
Yeah.
And they've designed the whole floor to be architecturally kind of carbon neutral and everything. But anyway, what he does is he's got a platform that he's developed for companies 250 employees and above, who either now or very shortly going to have an obligation to
Mhm.
report the transport. So he's focused on
Yeah.
transport emissions from even staff, not only the supply chain, but staff coming in and out of the office.
Okay.
Um, do you have any tools or anything that you use to make the complexity a little easier?
Yeah, yeah, we do actually. We around 21, we got the sense of where things were going, and we knew that the old way of doing things around Excel sheets and this kind
Mm.
of these kind of things was on its way out. You could tell, and obviously AI wasn't really a thing then unless you were really plugged into it. But we got a sense of the direction of travel, so we actually onboarded a small team of kind of software systems team, and they've since 21 they've been building our own tools and systems to actually do some of this stuff because if you get a financial export from an organization, it could be 100,000 purchases, and obviously doing that manually is, well, yeah. So we've had to build some of our own tools to do that. And for example, in this instance where we have commuting, if we can if we can get the postcode of where the employee lives and obviously the office or something about their, if it's deliveries or whatever, their kind of typical rounds, we'll feed that into our system, and it will help us doing some of the computation and working out that, and then applying a carbon factor if it's rail, if it's bus, if it's a HGV, whatever it might be. But yeah, without those tools, you wouldn't really be able to do it to an adequate level
Yeah.
of detail. But yeah, this work sounds quite interesting. Actually, maybe I should
Yeah,
reach out.
I'm going to make a note to introduce you to him.
Thank you.
The Is there any such thing as an ideal client for you in the corporate space, or is it literally anybody that has got a requirement?
I think our ideal clients are, on your kind of your innovation curve. I think it's kind of. I don't think it's the real kind of front of the pack. I think it's the early adopters and the early kind of pragmatists. It's in that first big chunk of the bell curve. I
Yeah.
think those companies that go. I think that's our sweet spot really, because we want that kind of we want that passion and that enthusiasm. And I think often where sustainability strategies fail, I suppose, like many strategies within an organisation, because they don't quite have the approval at the top or at board level. It hasn't been filtered, and that
Mm.
authority or that commitment hasn't been filtered down. So I think when you have those companies that are on that kind of big part of the early side of the adoption curve, they have an impetus. It's coming from board level to some extent, and management, which is, this is an important part to our identity or our business strategy. We need to carve out some kind of some beachhead in this space and in sustainability or in carbon or whatever it might be. And so I think that works very well for us, because then we have the buy-in, we're given the resources to do it. Um, the laggards, they tend to not be so great for us, because although we can do a kind of compliance approach, it is a bit like pulling teeth. So we
Yeah.
need that kind of level of enthusiasm, but also I think really we're probably more pragmatists than anything else. Um, there are other companies that are very passionate, maybe, but they're more activists in their nature. We tend to be, our makeup of our companies is kind of architects, engineers, natural scientists, ecologists, that kind of thing. So we tend to be a bit more pragmatic, and we're kind of, it's always
Yeah.
six of one, half dozen the other, and then we're helping optimize. We're not kind of banging a drum. So I think we're suited to that early adopter, but yet pragmatist approach, or company. And I think for us, SME to mid market companies tend to fit that. When we get into the big
Yeah,
beasts, they can be obviously it's like an oil tanker, very very hard to turn around.
yeah.
But those mid market companies that of a decent size, decent scale, but have a passion, and you can speak to the C-suite, and they're like, "Yes, we're going to do this." That is really, really exciting. That's really inspiring, and I think that's when we get the most change, and we can yield results within 6 to 12 months, and that's incredibly exciting.
Great. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Just briefly on the kind of more construction side,
Mm.
Chris, I think it's you telling me that, I mean, they're under a stricter set of rules, aren't they?
Yeah,
I think in London, there's a, tell us a bit about if
yeah,
you're a construction developer in London, what some of the
yeah.
things you have to comply with.
It's actually it's really quite tough actually.
Yeah.
The regulation comes from the Greater London Authority (GLA), and they've got a plan called the London Plan, and this has been
Mm,
in force for I think 9 years.
mm,
But the rule is what they call any major development, so that would be over 1,000 meters squared, or if it's a residential, it'll be over 10 flats or 10 units, 10 houses, and that triggers a whole raft of sustainability measures. So that will be they've got a carbon price. So if you need to pursue net zero, if your buildings aren't net zero, then you've got to pay a carbon price of £95 per tonne for 30 years. They have requirements around additional green space, summer overheating, air quality. So I mean, as far as I'm aware, at least, it's London as a whole. I mean, obviously London's enormous. London is the size of
mm,
other countries in terms of its population.
mm,
So I would say London is probably one of the most advanced spaces in terms of its sustainability regulation, and it is quite hard. And I think the fact that obviously London rates property values are so high is the reason it
mm.
can sustain it. You couldn't really have such an aggressive sustainability agenda in parts of the north of England because the property market just couldn't tolerate it because, it does, to be honest, it does impose additional costs on development, a cost of compliance. But I think it does lead to good by and large. I think it leads to better results, and the quality of the performance of the buildings definitely are better. So yeah, but yeah, London is certainly pretty progressive, and it's actually you'll see if you look at the London plan, it covers everything, like from social spaces to biodiversity and planting green roofs to energy to well-being. It's the whole thing. I think it's about 600 pages, that policy document. So
Wow.
yeah, they're really going for it.
Compre- Yeah, good. Well, that's good. Even though I guess the businesses don't always see it as so positively, but
No.
that's a great plan for London. Tell us, Chris, so you've had this sort of great growth then from 2011. Now you've got 50 people. What
Mhm.
are your ambitions for the next couple of years?
Yeah. Well, there's probably one that's a bit more internal and probably one that's a bit bigger.
Mm,
So around we had quite an interesting time up until probably 2020, as sustainability was probably still a bit of a niche thing. Like certainly when we first started it, you were kind of probably the least welcome person in the room, and it was, oh god, the sustainability person's here and they're going to ask me to do this and that and that kind of thing. But obviously as it's grown, it's got more acceptance, and up until that point I think we there was you were a bit more under the radar, and that was an interesting dynamic. And then around 2020, 21, everything went crazy, and everyone piled in. So the amount of organisations trying to do the same thing has probably gone up by a factor of four. So that's a really different market for us to understand. So we've got to be a bit more, I think, aggressive and introspective around what is our value proposition, and keep working on that, refining it, and trying to find out more, I suppose, about our market and how we serve it better to try and grow and keep ahead of the curve. And then on the other side of things, we've got some other projects we're looking at conservation and carbon projects, and how to actually help develop them. So that's how, I suppose, ultimately taking on the role and supporting the role of a project development. So if it's a conservation project in, say, Nigeria, it will be planting trees, other kinds of conservation activities. How do we do that? Generate carbon credits, and then I suppose sell them to the markets. And really, what we're trying to do there is we're trying to turn conservation into a business model that's actually profitable. And up until now, conservation is always something nice that a national park does or the government has to fund because it doesn't pay back. You're just protecting something at your own expense for the good of everyone, the good of the planet and the environment, and the local environment as well. What we're trying to do is try and challenge that business model and turn it into properly valuing the natural capital and natural assets which we're conserving, protecting, and restoring, and then putting a value on that and finding someone to pay for it who's willing to sponsor it and be a custodian of those assets. And I think that is the direction which the broader sustainability, ESG, banking kind of take on what a sustainable economy looks like. That's the direction they're moving in, but no one's quite cracked the formula yet. But it's a big goal for us. But I would like to position us more as to how we can contribute that and kind of be a part of that equation. But yeah, it's a major ambition, that's for sure, because yeah, everyone's trying to crack that nut.
Is that connected with carbon offsetting? I mean, do your
Mm-hmm.
clients have a requirement for carbon offsetting, and then does that naturally? Because obviously there's a bigger purpose there of conservation, which is
Yeah,
fantastic. But was it a natural thing because your clients were kind of had a requirement to do
yeah.
some form of carbon offsetting?
Yeah, that's absolutely right.
Yeah,
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 I mean, with conservation projects, when you design them, I mean, carbon kind of pays the bills. You can sell a carbon credit for $15, £15 a ton, whatever it might be, and attached to that, you will have lots of other activities like improved biodiversity or improved air quality or some additional socio-economic benefits for the people of the region, those kind of things, and they're kind of tagged on. They're called core benefits, but they're kind of like nice extras which maybe pushes up the value of the credit a little bit because maybe your buyer is willing to spend an extra £3 per ton, knowing that it comes with these additional benefits. What we're trying to do, I suppose, is trying to actually properly kind of add that into the pricing. And we don't want to be selling $15 a ton. We want to be selling $30 a ton because it has biodiversity, air quality, water
right,
quality as well, and
yeah,
trying to monetize that. But yeah, at the moment, carbon credits is the business model, and
yeah.
that's what's paying the bills for conservation at the moment.
When you look at all of the things you're involved with, because that sounds quite a major piece of strategy there to
Yeah.
branch off into that area. But when you look at the business, your business as a whole,
Mm.
and you're looking to grow, what's your number one challenge? Do you think as you start to look ahead on your growth plan?
I think
Is it that proposition? Is it defining the proposition you spoke about earlier, or is it
I think it is.
finding new customers? Or
I think it's the proposition, and I think it's connecting the proposition with the customer because
yeah,
I think we have lots of customers for whom the proposition might not be the right one for them. So I think it's joining those two up, which is quite important. Um, I think actually the more I suppose the more we do this and the more we grow, finding the right people and the right talent is probably
mm,
half the battle for
mm-hmm,
this
mm-hmm,
because as you know, Matt, we can't do everything in our businesses. You need fantastic people, and it's an interesting one, isn't it? When you go from a small kind of startup into something else, you got to start giving away decisions and
yeah,
decision making, and you got to
yeah,
crowdsource those kind of things. That's quite a difficult thing to do when you've gone from kind of founder startup to
yeah,
and yeah, I think the more and more I think you grow and you deliver services at various different levels, I think you realise that so much of your business is actually a recruitment and training
mm-hmm, mm-hmm,
exercise, and
mm-hmm,
just getting the right people with the right mindset to get involved in these projects. I think that's probably half of the battle. And actually, I think when you have good people and we drop them into various challenges, some of our team, I'm so I wouldn't say proud because it's their achievement, but it's kind of I'm so impressed with how well they troubleshoot and solve something, and that is incredibly rewarding.
yeah,
Uh, yeah, and I like that. So yeah, I think so. There's the external value prop and getting that right for the right client, and then it's how are we actually going to, I suppose, feed and support that value proposition
yeah.
by getting the right people in the right places.
I assume that when you look at sort of what's the younger generation, the graduates, etc., is that there must be more people now coming out that have got either a bit of academic or educational background in some of these areas, plus a real passion for it. Are you seeing that?
Yes, I think there's loads of passion, and I think there's lots of people that are actually kind of casually literate around the subjects
Mm,
of
mm,
sustainability environment.
mm.
I think, unfortunately, that's the net is probably negative, because I think there's lots of other kind of baggage that comes with, I think, being a graduate now. And I think we saw it after COVID, the impact that all COVID had on education. I think a lot of graduates were kind of, I suppose, in terms of their general understanding of how business works and being in an office environment and things like that was lacking. And things we took for granted,
Yeah.
so is not there. So it's quite strange, I think, for someone in their 30s or 40s to kind of, not understand. We watch people who maybe don't understand phone etiquette or meeting etiquette and things like that, and you're kind of thinking, wow, this is tough. We've got to really start from first principles for some of
Yeah.
these people.
Yeah.
So I think, what unfortunately, what we gain in passion, we've got to do a lot more work, and I think this is for most companies. I suppose teaching a lot of recent graduates how to be in a company and what that's like, and increasingly, I'm not sure if it's a kind of cohort thing, but we see more and more graduates that come without having early kind of low paid menial jobs. So for example,
Mm,
people work at McDonald's at 16 to kind of
mm-hmm,
get some extra money
mm-hmm.
before when they're doing A levels and things like that. We're seeing less and less of that. So some people that come to us, and some people we have employed in the past, have probably had at 21, 22, 23, have had no employment experience. And that, I think for a lot of people, maybe it's a slightly older generation thing. You would go and get a Saturday job, or you go with just
Yeah.
something.
Yeah.
And I think so many graduates don't have that, and they're at a huge disadvantage from not having that experience. So again, that's something we've got to try and free.
Yeah, that's a big responsibility that falls to the first employer, right? Which is you're taking something very, very green that's never really worked. They've just gone from school to university,
Yeah,
and you really got to go from the basics. Yeah, that's
yeah,
interesting. Tell me a little bit about the wider sustainability movement and how
mm,
the state of the nation really kind of stuff. It
yeah,
sounds like London has got at least London's got a great plan,
mm,
and they actually have got the carrot and stick, certainly in the construction sector. But
yeah.
overall, how do you think the UK is doing in terms of commitment to greenhouse emissions, carbon,
Hmm.
sustainability?
So, oof, this is a big one. I'm I'm not overly happy with how the UK is doing, and it's not necessarily because of their ambition. I think the UK is probably one of the most ambitious countries. So, for example, in 2008, it signed the Climate Change Act, which set its
Mm,
net zero goals and the methods
mm,
by how it was going to at least
mm,
kind of, I suppose, plan to get there, and I suppose the institutions they were going to build in order to do that. The implementation's been absolutely shocking, and the kind of the you're seeing it now, unfortunately, with the energy secretary, dare I say, that what we call greenwishing, which is just, it's such a good thing, we must do it, and if I just say it, it will happen. And there's a real lack of I think, analysis and like asking. Unfortunately, we see this in companies that come to us in the corporate realm. They might say we need to be net zero by 2030, and we say, well, how did you come up with that date and that kind of thing? And they haven't actually. There's no roadmap where someone's really troubleshooted it and done scenario analysis. It's just, on a bit of a whim, that's what we need to do, and that's where we're going. And we have had companies where we said, unless this is not possible unless you contract your sales by say 20%, and they've said, of course, we're not doing that. So, and I think the UK government has got itself into a similar position. It's come up with very, very incredibly lofty and ambitious goals. UK, in terms of carbon, has some of the most ambitious um, goals in terms of, let's say, being net zero. But they've done the methodology very badly. They don't count the emissions properly, so they only count the emissions that happen within the UK boundary. So if you deindustrialize, if your steel plant shuts and then moves to China and you start importing steel, that's counted as great. That's a carbon kind of
right.
saving, but
Yeah.
it's actually
Yeah.
not. So
Yeah.
it's actually quite hard to describe how badly formulated the methodology that the government uses, and I dare say that our team could generate a better methodology in about 3 days. But there we go. So I think they have loads of ambition. The execution is really quite poor, and unfortunately, it's leading to things like the reason we have energy bills at the prices they are in the UK. It's because we have a very badly constructed market, and we haven't been honest about what the other costs are, grid upgrades, and additional costs that happen downstream of renewable technologies like wind and solar. We've been kind of playing a bit of a kind of hiding game with where the costs are, and they're materializing at the end of pipe. And I think that's unfortunately causing a lot of skepticism. And you probably see it in the media. There's kind of We're getting pushback now, and in every week there's now a critique around net zero and decarbonisation. It's because I think the government, and also, to be fair, a lot of lobbyists and green people have not been honest that this is going to cost us, and it's going to cost us to this kind of tune, and we're going to do this, but it's going to be worth it because we're going to get a better environment, whatever it might be. They haven't made the case. I think they've taken the easy option, which is pretend it's all going to be wonderful, and then obviously when you get into it, it's hard and it's expensive. So, yeah.
Yeah, yeah, interesting. Yeah, some tough choices, right? I mean, the with the economy sort of flatlining,
Mm,
and you don't get sort of the impression that there's a ton of ideas in terms of growth, and then
no.
there's, well, if there's no growth, why are we being hamstrung with all of these additional requirements around sustainability and so on? So
Yeah.
yeah, and you can see it with Trump as well, right? In
Mm-hmm.
the US, that's part of his mantra. So
Mm-hmm.
yeah. So do you have any? It doesn't sound it, but do you have any increased optimism with Labour? I mean, Labour have got, with the new government. I mean, they've got now the defence
Yeah.
situation as well. They've got some other big
Yeah.
things to think about. But when they came in, were you more optimistic, or is this
Really.
really apolitical? Yeah.
Yeah. I was worried about them coming in because they made lots of crazy commitments, and I think you got a sense when they were making them in the run up to the election. You were thinking, I
Mm,
don't know how this is possible. How they're going to do? They're promising everything to everyone, and you just kind of think it's
mm,
not realistic. And I think that's been shown to be the case. Um, well, I think one of the upsides of the horrendous issue going on with at the moment with the Ukraine and Russia, and what that means for politics, etc., is obviously you saw this, like, you wouldn't have thought that Labour would have just come out and just cut foreign aid in half in order to fund the military budget, and
yeah.
I think that obviously really annoyed a lot of their base and that kind of things. But I actually thought that was quite impressive in some senses, that they just did it. They made a decision. They actually just
Yeah.
really did it, and maybe that's a kind of makes you think. Well, if they're willing to do that in that context, maybe this is like a bit of a wake up call that maybe
Yeah.
they can't continue to pretend everything's okay, and they're going to have to do some other decisions that are actually going to work. I've got the spring budget. I think I dare say I suspect we're going to see some very un-Labour things coming up in the spring
I think
budget,
I
like
think you're right.
like spending cuts.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but, mm,
Well, we can't leave on that note. Is there anything? I mean, what would you? Just one last thing on sustainability.
yeah.
What's a great thing that you've seen in the UK? Could be elsewhere, but let's try and stick to the UK. What's a really good initiative that you think has been done or executed really well? It might be private sector, it might be a company, it might be government initiative, it might be a target, it might be a bit of innovative thinking, is there anything that you could look at and think, actually, that is a really good idea or program?
Hmm. It's a good
That
one.
he's
Um,
struggling.
yeah, yeah. There's um, I mean, there's some good products, I think, and I think one of the challenges we have in this sustainability space, which kind of feeds back into, I suppose, some of the tone we're talking about the government, is that we'd like to believe that we have all the answers and we've got the technologies, and that's kind of the messaging. If you look at it, we've got everything, we've got wind, we've got solar, we've got this, we just need to go forward, and it's just about
Mm,
willpower. And that's not actually the case. We have a lot of technological leaps and discoveries and innovation, R&D we need to be doing. I mean, my prescription would be to scrap a lot of the net zero targets and things like that, and spend the immediate money on a World War II kind of investment in R&D, get some breakthroughs in new
mm,
technologies, better nuclear power, more efficient renewables, whatever it might be. Because all of this stuff around net zero, it's when you look at it, when you're in the detail, so much of it is fundamentally dependent on some form of technology advancement or breakthrough. when we're looking at construction, we have these innovative materials that come along that use recycled products or feedstock, and there's some good ones, but there's always a fly in the ointment somewhere. Um, the SMR program, I think, could be quite interesting. So that's the small modular reactors. Now that's still an R&D kind of project, and I'm hoping that Rolls-Royce will be asked to lead it, given their kind of pedigree and everything like that. That's an early R&D project, but if that goes ahead, that will be good. So the idea is you build, rather than building the world's most expensive object in the form of a nuclear power plant that we do likely to do at the moment, and it costs got twice as much and everything like that. You build much smaller ones, and you do the same modular build over and over and over again. So
Right.
you kind of
Okay.
So
Yeah.
you standardize. So your cost curve comes down like this, and the idea is that's supposed to reduce the cost of nuclear power. And there's been money spent on it, and there's China and Russia have an SMR, but the actual idea of the program of rollout hasn't been done yet. But I will be putting loads of money into schemes like that and trying to crack that nut. But I mean, there are some good products out there, but unfortunately, a lot of sustainability products tend to be worse, and they're relying on the user's moral kind of convictions or something, bridging the gap that this product's inferior, but I feel better about having it. And I don't think that's good enough. I think we need better products, and we know that was the message I found with electric cars. I mean, the benefit of electric cars is overstated when you crunch numbers, but I think how Tesla sold their cars wasn't like buy a Tesla and save the environment. It was this it's like driving a adult size scale electrics. Its acceleration is unbelievable. It's really cool, and like people wanted the Tesla because it was a cool car. Right?
Hmm.
I think the environmental side of thing was kind of felt like a secondary
Yeah.
order
Yeah.
priority, and I think that's how we need to sell sustainability, and that's
Yeah.
how we need to think about sustainability. It can't always be, it's a crap product, but it's good for the environment. It's kind of, we need a better product, and I'm
Yeah.
not seeing big innovations in that. There was a good company called Oxford PV, and I think I remember the pronunciation. It's called Perovskite Technology, but they managed to find a way to make PV panels 30% more efficient, which in kind of technology terms, in energy and equipment, is unbelievable. You never get a 30% leap. It's usually 2, 3, 4% in every cycle of development, and and it obviously takes decades, but they've managed to break, and that was amazing. It was obviously, and it was from Oxford University, I think, which was amazing. Unfortunately, because of our very poor economic environment, they didn't want to scale up and grow in the UK, so they left and chose somewhere with better capital markets. I think they ended up in Germany actually, and I've heard they may be looking at the US now. But yeah, so you kind of, I think it's about technological breakthroughs, and there's little flickers of light, but we're not taking the R&D seriously, and I think we need the mother of all R&D initiatives, and we can kind of bring some of these kind of material technologies or low impact products or new energy generating technologies. We can kind of empower them and bring them to life. I think that's what's needed really. Otherwise, we're tweaking and optimizing and tinkering, and
Yeah.
that's not the answer.
Yeah. Great. All right. Some really good thoughts there. Yeah. And I mean, the UK does have a track record in great breakthroughs,
Absolutely.
inventors, R&D. So let's hope we get more of that in this
Mm.
in this area. Let's wrap up.
Okay.
I really enjoyed that conversation. Some really great insights there. I ask this to everybody at the end: who's been a inspirational person in your life that's really been a positive impact on your professional life? And could be quite often it's an early leader, but it doesn't have to be
Mm.
a family member, a famous person. But who's been an inspiration for you?
And it's some people who've led by the negative example, like I don't want to be that. But it's funny because this person is obviously given so much coverage right now, and they're all over the place. But like someone like Elon Musk is a cliche now. But and obviously with all his political kind of actions and stuff like that, he's everything's getting shrouded in a lot of negativity. But
Yeah.
I think his general approach to business is absolutely astounding. So I actually met when Tesla was 12 people. I happened to live in the US for a year. I actually met one of the people who worked there, and he took me for a whiz in the first the first model of Tesla.
Oh wow, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
and it was so cool. I remember he shouldn't have done this, but he did a kind of almost like a drag race, and I can't remember if it was a Lamborghini or Ferrari, and he took off, it was pretty cool. Anyway, and that was in San Francisco. But yeah, if you think where Tesla's gone, and what it took to get there, and then there's obviously all the other kind of action, SpaceX and everything like that. Someone So you put all the current contemporary politics and everything like that aside, like the level of ingenuity is just phenomenal, and I think the kind of general approach, as I understand that he brings to his businesses, is the ground up thinking, always looking to solve a problem and kind of forgetting all of the precedents and the kind of, oh, this is how it's been done empirically. It's kind of, no, forget all that. We're going from the ground up and we're going to solve a problem like we mean to solve a problem. And I think his management style is quite interesting, which is also covered in one of the recent, I forget the name of the chap, but he did the autobiography of Steve Jobs and Elon Musk. He followed him around for a couple of years, and he talks about this, and you kind of hear it in anecdotes and things like that. But Elon Musk has quite an old style of kind of CEO management. So he'll, rather than the modern day kind of suppose CEOs that maybe haven't come up from the ground up or whatever, they've kind of done an MBA and moved on and that kind of stuff, and they're up here. Elon Musk does that thing where he'll go into a factory, and if there's a problem, like say with a Raptor engine propeller, jet engine for the SpaceX. If there's a problem with a gasket, then there's lots of anecdotes like this, but then he'll go and sit with the guy on the design or the production line, sit with them for 4 hours until 10 p.m. or whatever, working out what is the problem, find a solution, then zoom back out and then go into a board meeting and that kind of thing. So that, like, being up there and then hyper deep dive to solve micro problems, and then coming back out, I think that's a really impressive way of managing a company. And if I'm not an expert in it, but I believe that kind of model was quite an old school model that was done earlier in the kind of 20th century by CEOs like Henry Ford and things like that. They were of the detail and of the shop floor, and that allowed them to have that context rather than being the helicopter view of everything. So I find that really inspiring, and I think that's fantastic, and it seems like that's what's led to so much success in his life and that kind of thing. So that's something I try and practice, kind of wherever I can. I started as a analyst consultant in my company, really, and then did more or less everything in some way, shape, or form on the way up. And now, obviously, I'm in my kind of director role. But I think that allows me to do these troubleshooting and things like that. And I don't think we've ever had a problem we haven't solved. And that's not necessarily down to me; it's the team. But it's kind of knowing how to solve a problem, which I think gets you from A to B to C. And yeah, I find that really inspiring with
Good stuff.
Yeah.
With Elon. Good stuff. Great. Okay. Thank you so much, Chris. That was a great conversation.
Thanks, Matt. Appreciate it.
I've learned some stuff there. Thank you for your time.